We continue now at the top of Daf Chavtes Amud Aleph and Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 29a. On the previous summit, the end of the Mishnah was discussing somebody who's being taken out to be killed. And it said at the end of the Mishnah that if he's being taken out by the court to be killed, so you have to apply to him the stringencies as if he might be alive or he might be dead. And the Gemara now is in the second version of Rav Yosef. In this second version of Rav Yosef says the Mishnah is talking specifically about a non-Jewish court, because in a non-Jewish court they accept bribes. So it's possible this individual, even though he was being taken out to be killed by the court, it's possible they accepted a bribe, and therefore he is now still alive. Avol bebezdin shal Yisrael, but in a Jewish court, kevan to denafik dina liktala katali, once they have a verdict that he should be killed, he is going to be killed. It is not going to be retracted, and therefore we can assume with certainty that he is dead. Amar le Abayis, Abayis says back to Rav Yosef, Bezin shal Yisrael nami, in a Jewish court as well, Efshar dechazu lezechusa, isn't it possible that they'll find something about the case in his merit, and therefore they'll reverse the ruling? And the Gemara answers, Ki chazu lezechusa, when did they find a merit? Mekame de ligmar dina, that's only before the Gemar din. But basa Gemar dina, but after the Gemar din, after the final verdict, sulo chazu lezechusa, they no longer look for a merit, they will no longer reverse the decision of the court. And the Gemara continues, Lema Messiah, let's say a support for this idea. It says in the Mishnah, Kol Makom Sheyamdu Shnayim V'Yomru Mi'idim Onu Es Ish Ploni Shenigmar Dino Bebezin Shal Ploni Uploni Edav Hareza Yeharig. This is the Mishnah in Makos. Anytime two people stand up and they say, we testify about a certain person, that he had a Gemar Din in a particular court, and so were the witnesses, so we can assume that that person should be killed. And so over here you see that there was a ruling in the court, and we're assuming he should be killed. We're assuming there's no reversal. This seems to be a support of what we said, that in a Bezin Shal Yisrael, once the word goes out that he should be killed, he is killed. But the Gemara says, Dilma Boreach Shani. The Gemara says, like it said in the previous summit, that case was talking about a person who ran away from the court. In a situation where he ran away, so it seems clear that he is guilty. In that situation, it will not be reversed. But in other situations, it might be reversed. And the Gemara continues, Tashma coming here. Another proof, Shama mi bezin shal Yisrael shal yuamrim ish ploni meis ish ploni nerag. If we hear a Jewish court saying so-and-so died, or so-and-so was killed, yasiyo es ishto, so then they can allow his wife to remarry, we can assume with certainty that he is dead. But if they hear it from the Jewish courts, those who administer the death penalty in the Jewish courts, ish ploni meis, ish ploni nerag, so-and-so died, so-and-so was killed, al yasiu es ishto. So then they cannot allow his wife to remarry, because in the non-Jewish courts, it's possible that it was reversed. And the Gemara says, my mesu, my nerag. Now, what does it mean that they heard it from these courts that he died or he was killed? Elema meis mamish v'nerag mamish. If you say it means that he actually died, he actually killed, in other words, they're not testifying that he was being taken out to die or to be killed, but they're actually saying that he actually did die or was killed, but that doesn't make sense. In the similar case by the non-Jewish court, why can't his wife remarry? And haven't we established? Anytime the non-Jews are talking in regular conversation, they don't realize that they're testifying, so we actually do trust them, we do believe him, and so therefore in that case as well, the wife should be allowed to remarry. And so the Gemara says, like it said on the previous summit, Elalav, rather is it not Meis Yotze Lamas? When we say the word Meis over there in the Bryce, it means he's being taken out to die. V'nerag Yotze Leharag, and Nerag, he's killed, it means to say he's being taken out to be killed. V'katani bebezin shal Yisrael, yasiu es ishto. And it says that in a Jewish court, so his wife's allowed to remarry. We see from here that in a Jewish court, it is certain that if the person is being taken out to be killed, he will be killed. And the Gemara says, Liolam, no, really, meis mamish v'nerag mamish. Really, this Bryce is not talking about being taken out to be killed. It's talking about he actually died, he was actually killed. And the question was, in the similar case by the non-Jewish courts, so then why don't we believe them in that case? It's Mesiach lefitumo v'akaimalon, t'chol Mesiach lefitumo heimune mehemni. Haven't we established that anytime you have a case of Mesiach lefitumo, we believe what the non-Jew is saying? And the Gemara answers to that as it answered on the previous summit. Hanimili b'milsa the lo shaychiba. That's only true by a situation which is not relevant. Avol b'milsa the shaychiba, but in a situation where it's relevant to the non-Jew, meaning there's a reason why he might be lying. So avdi lechzuke shikrayu. So then in that situation, even in Mesiach lefitumo, even if it's in the course of regular conversation, it might be a lie in order to strengthen the lie, so to speak, in order to make it look like they're carrying out this justice. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hamevi get be'Eretz Yisrael. If someone is delivering a get in Eretz Yisrael, v'chol, and he becomes sick, he could send it, he can appoint another shliach, he could send it with another shliach. V'yamamar lo tol lihe meno chayfetz ploni. Now, if he tells him, meaning if he tells the shliach, when you get there and deliver the get, take from her this particular object. I want you to deliver back to me. Lo yishalchenu b'yad acher. So in that case, he can't send the get with somebody else. She'ein ritzono sheyeh pikdono b'yad acher, because then we can assume the husband doesn't want that his pikadon, that whatever this deposit is that's being watched, he wants this particular shliach to watch it. He doesn't want anyone else to watch it. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Kahana says, Chola Tanan. In the Mishnah it says, if he is sick, meaning in a situation where he's ill, then he can appoint another shliach. Otherwise, he cannot appoint a second shliach. And the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? Chola Katani, that's exactly what it says in the Mishnah. It says he became sick. Mahu Detema, no, what might you have said? Hu adin afagav de lo chola. The same would be true, even if he did not get sick. V'hayde Katani chola urcha de milsa Katani. The only reason it gets sick is because that's a standard case. A person would appoint a second shliach if he became sick. Kamash Malon, and so that's what Rav Kahana is teaching us, that no, the Mishnah means specifically in a case where he is ill, otherwise he cannot appoint a second shliach. And Rashi explains, Chola Tanan, it says in the Mishnah that he became sick, Do'onis, meaning it was an onus. So if it's an onus, then he can appoint another shliach. V'uadin l'chol onsin, the same would be true by all onsin. Aval I lo onis lo yishalchenu b'yad acher. But if not for the fact that it was an onus, so then he should not send it with somebody else. And the Gemara continues, Hey Chidami, what exactly is the case? Ida Amar le holech. If he just said, meaning the husband just said to the shliach, Holech, take this get to my wife. So afagav de lo cholanami. So even if he didn't get sick, he should be allowed to appoint another shliach. V'idamar le at holech. And if he said, you take it, so he specified that you should be the shliach. So afilu cholanami lo. So even if he became sick, he should not be allowed to appoint another shliach, because the husband said, specifically it should be you. V'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And if it's Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, afilu cholanami lo, even in a situation where he became sick, also he shouldn't be able to send it with someone else, as the Gemara demonstrates. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, as follows: Holech getzel leishti. If a person says Holech getzel leishti, harezem mishalcho b'yad acher, the halacha is he could send it with somebody else. At Holech getzel leishti, if he says you take this get to my wife, harezem lo yishalchenu b'yad acher, then he cannot send it with somebody else. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Bein kach uvein kach, no matter what the phrasing is, ein hashliach osa shliach. A shliach is not allowed to appoint another shliach. And so then again, that's the question of the Gemara. We don't have such a scenario where if he becomes sick, he can send it with somebody else, and if he doesn't become sick, he's not allowed to send it with somebody else. That does not appear as any opinion of any Tana in this brayso. And the Gemara answers, if you want, I could say holech vu dechala. The case of our Mishnah is he says holech, and in a situation of holech, what the brayso means to say is if he becomes sick, he can send it with somebody else. But if he does not become sick, even in a case of holech, he's not allowed to send it with somebody else. If you want, I could say a second answer, at holech. The case of our Mishnah would be at holech, v'chol shani. And when a person becomes sick, it's different. In other words, when the brayso said by at holech, you can't give it to another shliach, that was in a standard case. But maybe if he becomes ill, he is allowed to, even in a situation of at holech. And if you want, I could say Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Our Mishnah is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. And again, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel in the brayso said that a shliach is not allowed to make a shliach. But again, we will say v'chol shani. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is talking about when the person is not sick, but when the person is sick, it is different. Then a shliach is allowed to appoint another shliach. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Hamevi get Beretz Yisrael, if somebody delivers a get in Eretz Yisrael, v'chol, and he becomes sick, hareza mishalcho b'yad acher, he can send it with somebody else. Uraminu, now we have the following contradiction from a Mishnah later on. Amar l'shnayim tenu get l'ishti, if a person says to two people, give a get to my wife, o l'shlosher, he says to three people, kisvu get tenu l'ishti, write a get and give it to my wife. Hare elu yichtavu v'yitnu, so then they themselves, they have to write the get and give it. Inhu in, avol shliach lo, so it appears from this Mishnah, they themselves have to do it, and they're not allowed to appoint a second shliach. And again, in our Mishnah it says, he is allowed to appoint a second shliach. Amar Abaya says, Hasam time amai, over there, what is the reason? Mishum bizoyon debal, the reason is that it's an embarrassment for the husband, that's why he doesn't want them to tell somebody else. But hachabal lo kapit, but over here, the husband is not makbid if the shliach laholacha makes another shliach laholacha. Rava says a different answer, Mishum demili ninu, because in that second Mishnah, in that later Mishnah, it's just words, it was just instructions, there wasn't an actual physical object. Umili lo mimser l'shliach, so words can't be given over to another shliach, that's why they themselves have to do it. However, in our case of our Mishnah, he's giving an actual physical get to the shliach, and that can be given over to another shliach. My Beinayu, and the Gemara says, what's the difference between the answer of Abaye and the answer of Rava? Ika Beinayu, the difference between them is Shliach Matana. Let's say you have a case of a Shliach Matana. So in a case of a Shliach Matana, there is no bizoyon debal, there is no embarrassment in that situation. However, it is a situation of a mere instruction. It is a situation of Mili Lo Mimser in L'Shliach. And the Gemara says, if it plugs the Rav Shmuel, and this is actually a machlokas Rav and Shmuel as well, Rav Amar Matana Eino Keget. Rav says a Matana is not the same as a get, because there is no bizoyon by Matana. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says Matana Harehi Keget. Matana is the same as get, because just like by get, that later Mishnah, it's a case of Mili Lo Mimser in L'Shliach, the same thing is true by Matana. And Rashi explains, the Mishnah later on says, Amar l'shnayim tenu get l'ishti, if he says to two people, give a get to my wife, v'lo nasan lehem get. The case over there is, again, there's no physical object he's giving to them. He doesn't give them the get. Asan edim, what he's doing is he's making them edim. V'afal pi shelo amar lehem atem atzmechem kisvu. Now, even though he doesn't say you yourselves do the writing, hare elu yichtavu v'yitnu. They have to write it, they have to give it. V'lo yomru l'sofer, they can't tell a scribe v'yichtav that he should write it. Kidim mefarish l'kamon, as will be explained later on. O l'shlosha kisvu get yichtavu, or if he tells three people, write it and give it. So again, heim atzvam, they themselves have to write it and give it. Sharei Omar lehem kisvu, because he said kisvu, he said that they have to write it. Rashi points out, aval Omar l'shlosha tenu get l'ishti. Let's say he tells three people, give a get to my wife. He doesn't say the word kisvu. So in that case, actually, yomru lacherim v'yichtavu v'yitnu. There, they actually could tell others to write it and give it. Mivnei shasa and bezdin, because in that case, he's appointed them as a bezdin. It's three people. V'rashoyin lasos shliach. Bezdin is allowed to appoint a shliach. But the point is, alma ein hayachid os shliach. But we see that an individual, meaning if it's not a bezdin, the yachid is not allowed to appoint another shliach. We see over here that they have to do it themselves. And the Gemara answers in that Mishnah later on, it's different. The first answer, the answer of Abaya, bizoyon debal, it's different because there's an embarrassment to the husband. Why is it embarrassing? Sha'olav lichtov es haget, because the responsibility to write the get is really upon the husband. Ve'eno rotza sheyedabo rabin she'eni yodei lakasva. He doesn't want people to know that he doesn't know how to write the get, and therefore it's a bizoyon debal in that case. So it makes sense to say that they cannot appoint, that a yachid cannot appoint another shliach. But hacha gabe holacha, but here where it's just delivering the get, lo kapid, the baal is not makpid, the makpid the ika. What hakpada is there? Why does the husband care if people know about the fact that he gave it to somebody to deliver it? That's the answer of Abaya. Rava Amar, Rava says that the explanation later on why they can't make another shliach if it's not a bezdin, hasam hainu time de lo mashvu shliach. The reason why they can't appoint another shliach, shalom maser lemelo devarim, because it was just instructions, it was just words. Ve'in b'devarim koach lios chozrim v'nim sarim. You can't have words be given, be passed along to someone else. La'acher, it can't be passed along to another person. Avol get to isbei mashasha chozrim v'nim sar, but by get, which has substance, it's a physical object that can be given over to somebody else. And the nafka mina between the answer of Abaye and the answer of Rava is shliach matana. By a shliach matana, shamar bal Abaye lebei zaydim kisvu shtar matana leploni. If the bal Abaye says to two witnesses, write up a shtar matana to gift something to so and so, itayim to get mishum bizoyin. If the reason why they can't give it to another person as a shliach is because of a bizoyin, if that's the reason by get, so hacha lekal meimer hacha, here there is no bizoyin. Sharei ein olav lekoso, because this person doesn't have a responsibility to write a shtar matana like a husband has a responsibility to write a get. Because we learned in the Mishnah when it comes to a matana, the person receiving the matana has to pay for the writing of the document. Therefore, in that case, if they want to, they can tell other people to write it. But according to the one who says the problem in the Mishnah later on is that it's instructions, it's not a physical object, and mili lo mimsran l'shliach, haninami lo mimsran. So here also, it's mili, it's lo mimsran l'shliach. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'im amar lo." If the husband says to the shliach, "Tol li heimenu chayfetz ploni," when you deliver the get to my wife, take back a deposit from her on my behalf. So in that situation, certainly the Mishnah said he should not appoint a second shliach. The first shliach should not appoint a second shliach. Amar Reish Lakish says, "Kan shona Rebbe." In this Mishnah, Rebbe taught, "Ein hashoel rashai lahashil, ve'ein hasocher rashai lahaskir." That a borrower is not allowed to lend out the object, and a renter is not allowed to rent out the object. Meaning the same thing over here. All the Mishnah is saying is that the person who's taking the deposit, he himself is supposed to take the deposit on behalf of the husband. He's not allowed to appoint someone else to take the deposit from the wife on behalf of the husband. But this has nothing to do with the kashrus of the get. In other words, according to Reish Lakish, let's say this shliach does appoint a second shliach to take and to deliver the get, so the get is still going to be considered properly delivered, and the woman will be divorced. The issue simply is he's not supposed to take the object. He's not supposed to take the chayfetz. Amar la Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, Zu afilu tinoko shel beis rabban yodim osa. This halacha that a borrower can't lend it out or a renter can't rent the object out, that even the school children know that halacha. That can't be what Rebbe is teaching us in this Mishnah. Ela zimnin de gita nami lo have. What Rebbe is actually teaching us is that there are some scenarios where if the shliach appoints another shliach and there was also an instruction to take back a deposit and that second shliach takes back the deposit, sometimes even the get will not be a good get. The nazik misha amarlo, because it can be similar to a case where he told him, Al tigr sha'el bebayis v'gir shabaliyah. He says, divorce her only in the house, and the shliach goes ahead and divorces her in the attic. In other words, the husband might have been makbid that it only happened in the house, and then if he does it somewhere else, he does it on the upper floor in the attic, so then it's going to be a problem. Or it could be similar to Al tigr sha'el biyamin. You should divorce her only with the right hand, v'gir shabismol, and then he divorces her with the left hand. That also, it could be a change that the husband is makbid on. And the Gemara now elaborates in terms of the machlokes, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. The Kuli Alma, everybody agrees as follows. When she comes out to greet the shliach, let's assume it's a second shliach, the shliach appointed a second shliach, and she gives him the object, she gives him the deposit, and then she takes from him, she takes from the second shliach the get. Kuli Alma lo pligi de gita ma'al yahava. Everybody agrees that's certainly a good get. The fact that the deposit was given to the wrong person, and really the husband wanted the deposit to be given to the first shliach and not the second shliach, that will not affect the status of the get. Ki pligi hechad amrle. The whole machlokas Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan is when the husband says to him, and Rashi explains, Amar Reish Lakish kan shana Rebbe v'Mishnah zu shana lanu Rebbe, and our Mishnah Rebbe is teaching us ein hashoel da detanan lo yishalchenu bi'aracher lo mishum bitule shlichus degita nakat lo. The point of Reish Lakish is when it says that the shliach shouldn't appoint another shliach, it's not saying that the get is going to be batal, that the shlichus of the get is bad. Dim shilach bi'aracher haget get. If the first shliach appoints a second shliach, it actually will be a good get. The alfagav dein ritzonu shebekdono bi'aracher, even though he doesn't want that second shliach to take the pikadon from the wife, shliach legarish miyashavi, he's still a good shliach in terms of divorce. The only reason it says in our Mishnah that the first shliach should not appoint a second shliach is in terms of the deposit, the idea that a borrower shouldn't lend something out, a renter shouldn't rent it out. And then Rabbi Yochanan responded, Zu afilu tinokos yodinosa. This even the school children know. Dem hishila lo letzorach acher mishila lo. Deinashol rashe lahashil v'nim zazeh over al daito umaknito. Obviously, if he lent it to him, it was for him. It wasn't for other people. And so therefore it's obvious, everybody knows that the borrower is not allowed to lend out the object. Rather, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that even the get itself might be a problem here. If the first shliach sends it with the second shliach, sometimes it won't be a good get, and we're going to explain what it means sometimes. Let's say he says to her, divorce with the right, and then he divorces with the left. The point is he didn't follow the instructions. He was supposed to do the shlichus a certain way. So too, sometimes over here, the way that the delivery happens, that's what the husband is makbid about. Now everybody agrees. From the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says sometimes it's not a good get, mashma derov pamim have a gita. It's mashma that Rabbi Yochanan agrees in most scenarios it will be a good get. Even if there's a second shliach that is appointed. So for example, if she gives the object to that second shliach, so there everyone agrees. If she gives the object first to kuliyamalo pligi to have a gita, the get is then given to her by the second shliach, it's for sure a get. The alfagav dein ritzono shebekdono bi'aracher, even though he doesn't want the deposit to go to that second shliach, shlichus de gita lo batal, that shlichus in terms of the get itself is not nullified. Kechol shlucha gita sheyecholon laso shliach, like any other shliach of a get can make another shliach. The get lo kapid bal ledavar zed, the get ain't totally bechayfetz. The husband's not makbid in terms of the get. The get is not dependent on the object. For example, maybe the person who was supposed to get the chayfetz can take the chayfetz, and then he'll send the get with somebody else. Therefore, even if there's some change and he doesn't do what he was supposed to do with the chayfetz, that doesn't affect the get. Because he's accepted the chayfetz, then he gives the get. It doesn't affect the get. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Tes Amud Beis.